When you go through these factors, when you actually try to understand what it is all about, it talks about the composition of a country like India, which is very, very diverse in nature. The population is growing at such a rapid pace altogether that we are not able to just grapple with it. Another feature of India's population factor is the rising density. Good morning and welcome to the second session, Chapter 1, Unit 1, first semester B.Ba, pre-reforms of Indian economy, where we are going to talk about the demographic features. Coming to the word demography itself, it is quite closely related to geography. That is, we are going to talk about the population, size, composition, diversity, growth, and quality of population. Now, when I talk about these terms, these are certain things which are of very, very high importance when it comes to our understanding. Why do I say this? Because when you go through these factors, when you actually try to understand what it is all about, it talks about the composition of a country like India, which is very, very diverse in nature. Now, when you talk about the 140 crore population in this country, you need to understand that the 140 crore people are unique. They are intellectually supernatural altogether. So we are talking about that basic understanding here of how population problem is specific to a country, and one needs to have a complete knowledge regarding the basic features. What happens in our country is that many a times we just go ahead and we start talking about population, we start talking about problems related to religion, caste, creed, opinions, color, or gender. But then you need to understand why these problems erupt in our country. Now, it is very, very simple to point a finger and say that India has got some fundamental problems. But then one has to take a deep dive session to understand the demographic features, where are the hidden challenges, so that you are able to understand and address the issues. Moving further, the large size and the fast growth. Now, this is one thing which I would like to talk about. In the 2001 census, India was 102 crores. In the 2022, we are about 140 crore. Look at the jump that we are talking about. The population is growing at such a rapid pace altogether that we are not able to just grapple with it. Sometimes we start feeling that the rate at which the population is expanding, is growing, is mind-boggling. We are not able to just resolve it with a one-line stopgap issue. It is something that which is just going on and on. And the bigger part of the story is that the size of the Indian population, which contributes roughly about 20% of the world population. Look at the size. The sheer size makes you completely flabbergasted. You feel that you're taken aback by this size. No other country in the world except China would see this kind of a rapid growth in population. We are proud about our citizens, and we really need to be proud about the fact that 50% of India's population are youngsters, which means, yes, we have a very thriving, energetic, and a daring and dashing youngster citizen population, which we are going to try. We're going to take up India to the next league, no doubt about it. But then what is that really makes us worry is the size. The sheer size of the population. Now, what happens is that China was at that time 127 crores. Roughly about 20% more than that of India. But now if you start seeing, again, India and China on comparison, if India is around 140, China is around 160 crore in terms of population. So this rapid growth in terms of numbers, and the bigger the size, this puts us in a big jeopardy. So we need to start addressing this issue. We need to see that how we can bring a control over the population explosion altogether. followed by the second stage of demographic transition that we are speaking about. Now, based on the theory of the population growth, it passes through three different stages as development proceeds. Now, what are those things? The first stage is characterized by high birth rate and high death rate. And in this stage, the net growth of the population is zero. The next one, this was the first stage that we are talking about. So you see that a high birth rate and a high death rate. So you see high birth rate here and a high death rate, which means to say that at the end of the day, the balance comes down. So it is nullified. It comes down to zero. So no need to worry about that stage. Well, that was the first thing that we were talking about in the year 1921. The second stage, as we started going in, it was a higher birth rate but a declining death rate. Now, why did this happen? Is because of the advanced healthcare features, awareness among the people. So what happened is that the population of India started surviving against those diseases. Now, that's a good sign. Why? Because we understood the importance of healthcare. We understood the importance of surviving in such a conditions, and that was really needed in the long run. But then what happened here is that from that 1921 to 1930, the second stage, the birth rate was 464, but the death rate was only 363. So significant drop in numbers, which we need to keep in mind. Now, this advancement, though you might say is not really high, though you might say that it is not that significant enough to talk about, but nevertheless, the population started growing from that particular time period. So it is very important for all of us to understand this entire stage. Followed by rapidly rising density. Now, this is a very big thing. Another feature of India's population factor is the rising density. Now, density is the population means to the average number of people living per square kilometer. Now, this might be slightly confusing if I'm going to talk about statistics and average to you. But nevertheless, these words are important for us. Why? Because we are going to learn about these things in the long run. We need to see that a population like that of Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Indore, or let's start talking about places like Kochi, or we are going to look into places like Kolkata. What you would be seeing here is that the population density is very high. The number of people living within 1 square kilometer is very, very high. That means these cities are overcrowded. So you don't have a space to move around. This is really suffocating in nature. And what happens here is that as the population starts growing, the density starts increasing, the amenities, the features of a good standard of life will start coming down. That's probably one of the reasons if you happen to visit Mumbai and you see the rush in the local train, one fears to step into it. Why? Because the density of population is extremely high. So that is probably the reason why people start thinking about why we need to migrate out of India, why we need to go to those places which are safer, which have a better living condition, which are good enough in terms of living. Now, this is something that is very, very interesting for all of us to understand and take forward. Now, what we see here is that the density of the population is somewhere around 117 during the year 1951, quite an old statistics. But just look at it. It has just doubled or tripled to 324 in 2001. So you see that this affects the land and the man ratio very adversely. So in a long run, you see that the population growth has been so rapid enough that it has gone threefold or fourfold times, reducing the living area for human beings and creating a huge challenge in terms of the population growth. Followed by the sex ratio composition that we have been talking about. Nevertheless, we have always been talking about this particular factor, 933 per thousand in the year 2001. Of course, this has increased. Today we talk about 967, which is quite a good ratio that we are talking about. In the state of Kerala, there are about 1,040 females per 1,000 male. The lowest female ratio was recorded in Sikkim in 832. Of course, Haryana is also one of the states which I would like to talk about. Talking about Andaman Nicobar Islands, where we have about only 760. So therefore, we see that somewhere still we are not one-on-one when we talk about the man versus the women factor altogether. Somehow, we had the stigma a long time back about a girl child in India. But today, we don't have that stigma anymore. We want to empower women. We want to understand that every girl child also has the right to live, right to achieve, right to educate, and make herself have a better career. So what we have been able to do here from the economic standpoint is that giving equal opportunities for women to come up in India. So that's how the sex ratio has improved in terms of comparison. And we've also seen that women are now grabbing the center stage. We have now gone to the level of understanding the maturity of understanding the equality factors have also started going up in India, which is definitely going to play a favorite role in terms of positioning ourselves as a better country globally. Followed by the bottom heavy age structure. So as you start going down, now when you start looking into the ratio of person 0 to 14, that was relatively high in 2001 census. Children below 14 years were 35.6%. The figure is lower than the figures of the previous year. But then now when you start seeing this age category, 18 to 30, India has got almost 50% of its population here, which is a very, very important and a significant factor. Why? When you compare India against European countries like Denmark, Poland, Norway, Netherlands, or Finland, all these countries have a problem of aging population. In that sense, I would also like to include Japan, which also have got people who are highly aged. Now, for a country, when the population starts aging faster and they're not able to replace it with younger, dynamic working professionals, automatically the relative production starts coming down. So automatically you will see that the productivity levels of that organization, of that particular thing, starts falling downwards, and we start seeing that this is one of the main causes of how the country loses in terms of its growth. But for India, the story is on the other side. India has been able to see that the young and the teenage based population has been significantly growing all across the country. Plus, we have also been able to see that the teenagers have started getting onto a larger gang, and now the working population, typically if I start seeing 18 to 40, all these people have been able to contribute much towards the growth and development. So definitely India is now going up the ladder. It's moving up the pyramid cycle altogether, and we would be able to get a better working population altogether. Now, predominance of rural population, we all know that in 2001, the rural population was 72.2% and the urban population was 27.8. Slightly as we move towards 2022, we see that the reduction in terms of rural population and moving in terms of the urban population. But nevertheless, one cannot deny the factor and one cannot just take it for an assumption mode saying that most of the people live only in cities. Still now, many people in India live in the rural sector. So when I talk about this, the tier 2 and tier 3 towns and cities is where we are really focusing on the population explosion. There's been a lot of development on the rural front in the upcoming years. So economically speaking, now the population is also bulging in those particular cities. So somewhere down the lane, you need to understand this factor that urbanization might be a trend 20 years back, but today we are getting back slowly to the rural areas, or rather I will put it as tier 2 and tier 3 towns, where we also see that the growth of the people have started in a very, very significant manner. So definitely this is a part that we need to work upon, though we have a huge amount of rural population, but that is on the beneficial side. Why? Because rural India is also developing in the modern times. Now, the low quality population, this is one thing that might sound negative to us apparently, but then what we need to see here is that it is not just about the birth rate and death rate. We are also trying to see a transition where we can see that the number of people that was featured in terms of the growth and the death rate, that is the number of people who had alive and the death that happened in 1921 to 30, the second phase that we are talking about, that actually started creating a set of population who were not really strong enough. And as we start going further, the immunity levels among the population has also started coming down. With this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the resources shared through this session would be of great importance and value to you, both in terms of theory and also in terms of practical. In the upcoming session, we will be talking about the Human Development Index, which is a very, very important concept in economics. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.